At 02:43 a.m., over the dark waters of the Persian Gulf, an American F-18 Hornet flying a routine patrol picked up a sudden radar warning. Two blips appeared on the screen, fast, closing in, and climbing. The pilot knew what it meant. Iranian coastal defenses had just locked on. Seconds later, two surface-to-air missiles launched from the shoreline near Bushehr. The sky lit up as the missiles streaked toward the jet. The pilot released flares, banking hard, but one missile struck. The shockwave ripped through the left wing, sending alarms screaming through the cockpit. The Hornet began to lose altitude. A distress call went out. "Mayday, Mayday! Eagle 1 hit! Engine failure, going down!" Command aboard the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower heard it. Within moments, communication lines between the carrier and the U.S. Air Operations Center in Qatar came alive. The attack had crossed a line. What came next was not a warning shot. It was retribution. The F-15EX Eagle II, America's newest generation of air superiority fighter, was already being armed and readied. Before we break down how the world's most advanced fighter answered that attack with a ruthless counterstrike, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and press the bell icon. Stay till the end, because what followed over the Gulf skies wasn't just an air battle. It was a cold reminder of why the U.S. still owns the skies. The night of the attack began like any other patrol mission over the Persian Gulf, a region that has seen decades of tension between U.S. and Iranian forces. The American presence in the Gulf isn't new. Since the 1980s, U.S. Navy carrier strike groups have operated there to protect global shipping routes, especially through the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway where nearly 20% of the world's oil supply passes. It's a vital artery, and both nations know its importance. That week, tensions were already rising. Satellite intelligence had detected unusual movements near Iran's southern coast. New missile batteries being deployed, radar arrays being repositioned, and fast attack boats moving closer to international waters. Intelligence analysts at the U.S. Central Command in Qatar flagged it as heightened readiness. But in the Gulf, such moves were nothing new. The U.S. Navy continued its patrols, maintaining presence and control. On the deck of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, known as Ike, F-18 Hornets and Super Hornets stood ready around the clock. Their mission: surveillance, deterrence, and defense of Allied shipping. Pilots flew long hours, scanning radar screens for anything unusual. The air felt routine until that night. At 02 a.m. local time, a flight of two Hornets, call signs Eagle 1 and Eagle 2, launched from the carrier to perform a standard patrol run. The Gulf was calm, the sky cloudless, and visibility perfect. They cruised at 20,000 feet, monitoring Iranian coastal activity. Nothing appeared out of the ordinary until radar began picking up faint emissions from a fire control radar on the Iranian coast. It was brief, almost teasing, as if testing response. The pilots reported it to the carrier and were told to maintain course but stay alert. Minutes later, that radar locked on again, stronger this time. Before anyone could react, missile plumes rose from the shoreline. Two Iranian Sayyad-2 missiles, based on old Russian designs but upgraded with local guidance systems, were airborne. Traveling at Mach 3, they closed the distance in seconds. Eagle 1 deployed flares and rolled hard left. The first missile detonated mid-air, but the second tracked straight into the jet's rear section. The explosion tore through the engine and stabilizer, sending debris flying across the night sky. The pilot managed to eject, parachuting into the dark waters below. Eagle 2 climbed rapidly and radioed the distress code. Back on the Eisenhower, the Combat Information Center fell silent for a moment. Then everything erupted. Orders went out across the ship. Rescue helicopters scrambled. The carrier's radar operators tracked the pilot's beacon. Within 20 minutes, a Navy MH-60S Seahawk located the downed aviator and hauled him out of the water. He was alive, but barely. The Iranian missiles had hit without provocation, and the U.S. command knew it. By dawn, the situation report had reached the Pentagon. This was no accident, no warning shot. It was a direct strike on a U.S. asset in international airspace. And that changed everything. For years, Iran had tested American resolve through smaller incidents: drone harassment, naval provocation, and missile launches near shipping lanes. But this was different. An American jet had been taken out, and the U.S. could not remain silent. Yet retaliation had to be precise, powerful, and unmistakable. The message from Washington was clear: respond, but don't escalate into war. The military needed an operation that would punish, deter, and demonstrate control, all without triggering all-out conflict. That's when the F-15EX Eagle II entered the picture. Stationed at Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates, a pair of F-15EX aircraft were already on alert status. The Eagle II is the latest evolution of the iconic F-15 platform, combining decades of combat experience with next-generation systems. It can fly farther, strike harder, and react faster than anything Iran could put in the air. At 06 a.m., U.S. Central Command issued Operation Silent Storm. The mission's objective: neutralize the Iranian missile battery responsible for the attack, disable its radar, and demonstrate U.S. air dominance without crossing into a full-scale conflict. By sunrise, crews at Al Dhafra were loading the F-15EX jets with Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missiles, JASSMs. These smart, low-observable missiles could strike from over 200 miles away, staying out of range of Iranian defenses. As the sun rose over the desert, two F-15EX fighters roared into the sky, heading northwest toward the Gulf. Their target was clear. Their message, unmistakable. This was not retaliation in anger. It was calculated precision, the kind that reminded the world exactly why the U.S. Air Force still leads the skies. At 07:42 a.m. Gulf Standard Time, radar operators aboard the USS Eisenhower and at Al Dhafra Air Base watched as two F-15EX fighters entered Iranian radar range. Their call signs were Viper 1 and Viper 2. Flying high at 35,000 feet, they maintained strict radio silence, relying entirely on encrypted data links for coordination. The air was tense, but controlled. Every movement was deliberate. Every second counted. As they crossed over the central Gulf, Iranian coastal radars picked up faint blips moving fast and high. The operators at the Iranian Air Defense Command in Bandar Abbas knew something was coming, but not from where. Within minutes, they began to activate their radar systems, unaware that doing so only made them easier to find. Inside Viper 1, the pilot watched his display as the F-15X AS Advanced Electronic Warfare Suite, known as EPAWS, lit up with enemy radar signatures. The system mapped every signal, every emission, identifying the exact type of radar guiding the Sayyad-2 missile battery that had downed the American jet just hours before. Coordinates were confirmed. Target locked. At 07:53 a.m., Viper 1 opened its bomb bay doors and released two AGM-158 JSSM cruise missiles. They dropped silently into the thin air, wings unfolding automatically as their engines ignited. Each missile flew at low altitude, skimming the sea surface to avoid radar detection. Traveling at subsonic speed, they were invisible on most Iranian sensors. 15 minutes later, the Iranian coastal base at Bushehr suddenly lit up on U.S. satellite feeds. The JASSMs had arrived. They climbed to terminal altitude and dove onto their targets, one slamming into the radar command vehicle, the other detonating on the missile launcher itself. The explosions were massive. Fireballs rose hundreds of feet into the air. Secondary explosions followed as stored fuel and ammunition ignited. Within seconds, the entire battery was gone. Iranian air defenses panicked. Operators scrambled to activate nearby systems. But it was too late. The attack had come from beyond their reach. The F-15EXs were still more than 150 miles away. As they turned back toward the Gulf, Their mission was already complete. But the operation wasn't over. U.S. Command wanted proof and deterrence in one move. Viper 2 climbed to 40,000 feet, activating its advanced targeting pod. From that distance, the infrared feed clearly captured the burning wreckage of the Iranian site. The footage, time-stamped and verified, would later be released to show the precision of the strike. At 08:22 a.m., the F-15EX pair received an encrypted order: execute Phase 2. This wasn't about destruction, it was about control. Iranian speedboats had begun to move toward the wreck site, possibly to rescue personnel or recover debris. The U.S. Navy's response was immediate. The nearby destroyer USS Gravely launched 2 Tomahawk missiles, striking the approaching boats before they could get close. The message was unmistakable: don't test the line. As the Iranian command tried to regain order, confusion reigned. Their radar coverage had collapsed in the Western Gulf. Communication between their air bases and missile sites was jammed by U.S. electronic warfare aircraft. For the next 2 hours, Iranian systems went dark, unable to track or respond. By 10 a.m., the skies were clear again. Viper 1 and Viper 2 refueled midair from a KC-135 Stratotanker before heading back to base. They landed at Al Dhafra shortly after noon, their mission flawless. No losses, no injuries, total destruction of the target. In Washington, President and Pentagon officials were briefed. The entire operation, from the downing of the Hornet to the retaliation strike, had taken less than 10 hours. The message had been delivered with surgical precision. Iran's response came hours later, statements denying involvement, blaming rogue elements, and warning against further provocations. But privately, Iranian commanders knew the truth. Their most advanced air defense site had been wiped out in one strike, and they hadn't even seen where it came from. For the American forces, the mission wasn't about revenge, it was about deterrence. It was proof that every attack on a U.S. aircraft or soldier carries a consequence, swift and exact. And in that single morning, high above the Gulf, the world had witnessed not just payback, but a demonstration of power executed with intelligence, precision, and restraint. The F-15EX had made its combat debut, and it had done so with a message that echoed far beyond the desert skies. America still rules the air. To understand how the U.S. delivered such a clean and decisive strike, you need to know what made the F-15EX so special. It is not just another fighter jet. It is the ultimate evolution of the Eagle lineage that began in the 1970s. But this new variant isn't built for the wars of the past. It's built for the digital battle space of the future. The F-15EX, officially known as the Eagle II, combines classic air superiority design with cutting-edge technology. It's faster than most jets in service today, capable of flying over Mach 2.5, about 1,900 miles per hour. Its twin F-110GE-129 engines give it incredible thrust, allowing it to climb, maneuver, and strike before an opponent can react. But speed alone doesn't define modern air dominance. What makes the Eagle II so deadly is how it sees, thinks, and acts. At the core of its power is its open mission systems architecture. This design allows the aircraft to integrate new sensors, weapons, and electronic warfare tools in weeks instead of years. That means when intelligence discovered the Iranian missile batteries, the F-15EX could quickly upload new mission software to locate and target those systems with precision. In simple terms, it adapts faster than the threat evolves. Its radar, the AN/APG-82 AESA, is one of the most advanced in the world. It can detect, track, and engage multiple targets over 200 miles away, even while jamming enemy radar. In the Gulf operation, this radar allowed the pilots to identify the Iranian fire control network without crossing into its range. Paired with the EPA-OSS, Eagle Passive Active Warning and Survivability System, the F-15EX became nearly untouchable. EPA-OSS scans, analyzes, and counters radar and missile threats automatically, allowing the pilot to focus purely on the mission. The weapon's loadout is another major factor. Each F-15EX can carry up to 29,000 pounds of weapons, more than any other fighter in the U.S. inventory. For this mission, they carried the AGM-158 JASSM, a stealthy, precision-guided cruise missile designed for long-range strikes. Each missile carries a 1,000-pound warhead and uses GPS plus infrared imaging to hit within a few feet of its target. Launched from over 200 miles away, these missiles can destroy hardened bunkers, radar stations, or launchers without the jet ever being seen. The coordination during Operation Silent Storm was also a showcase of networked warfare. The F-15EXs didn't operate alone. They were linked to Navy ships, satellites, and E-3 Sentry AWACS aircraft. Data flowed instantly between platforms, creating what's known as a combat cloud. This allowed every unit to see the same picture of the battlefield in real time. When the Iranian radar came online, that data was instantly transmitted to the Eagles, letting them react before the enemy even knew they were detected. On the naval side, the USS Eisenhower provided support through electronic surveillance, tracking Iranian communication signals, and feeding that intelligence to U.S. Air Command. The destroyer USS Gravely served as a protective shield, using its Aegis combat system to monitor for any retaliatory missile launches from the Iranian coast. Every layer of the operation worked together seamlessly. Another key component was the JASSM's stealth design. Traditional cruise missiles often show up clearly on radar, but the JASSM's low radar cross-section and terrain-following flight path make it nearly invisible until the final seconds. By the time Iranian operators realized they were under attack, the missiles were already seconds from impact. The operation also demonstrated another U.S. strength: electronic warfare dominance. While the F-15EXs carried out the strike, EA-18G Growler aircraft from the Navy jammed Iranian radar frequencies. This limited the enemy's ability to coordinate or track targets. For several minutes, Iranian radar screens went blank, leaving them effectively blind. Behind the scenes, satellites and cyber teams ensured that Iranian communications were disrupted. The F-15EX's flight path was coordinated with precision to avoid radar coverage zones mapped by U.S. intelligence. Every phase, from takeoff to target impact, was timed down to the second. By the time the strike concluded, not a single American aircraft had been detected, tracked, or engaged. The mission validated not only the F-15EX as a lethal weapon, but also the entire U.S. approach to networked warfare, where speed, stealth, and information supremacy decide the outcome before the first shot is fired. For America's adversaries, it was a sobering realization. While nations like Iran and others invest in missile defenses and radar systems, the U.S. has moved beyond just hardware. It now fights wars through integration, where sensors, aircraft, ships, and satellites act as one living system. And in that system, the F-15EX is the spearhead, fast, intelligent, and unstoppable. In less than 10 hours, the U.S. turned a surprise attack into a masterclass in precision warfare. The operation did not just avenge the hit on an American jet. It quietly broadcasted a message to every nation watching. If you strike first, you won't even see the answer coming. By noon, the picture was clear. The Iranian missile battery that struck the Hornet was gone. Satellite and drone feeds showed a smoldering site where radar vans and launchers once stood. 2 AGM-158 JASSM hits had left the area in ruins. The downed FA-18 pilot was rescued within 20 minutes of ejection. He received medical care aboard the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and was later flown to a field hospital. He survived. No American air crew were lost in the follow-up strikes. U.S. forces reported no aircraft losses during the counterstrike and no damage to coalition ships. Iran issued formal denials at first, calling early reports provocative claims, while state media blamed unknown actors. Intelligence analysts and independent satellite trackers, however, published time-stamped imagery that matched the U.S. account. Military sources said the strike removed the specific coastal radar and launcher complexes used in the attack. Nearby air defense nodes went silent for hours after the strike, and Iranian commanders scrambled to reposition assets farther inland. The immediate tactical effect was containment. The missiles and radars that threatened international airspace were neutralized. Merchant ships in the Strait of Hormuz reported normal transit within 48 hours, and insurance notices that had spiked after the incident began to drop. Politically, Washington framed the response as precise, limited, and aimed at deterrence. The Pentagon released a short statement. U.S. forces took targeted action to defend personnel and to protect freedom of navigation. NATO partners and regional allies publicly voiced support for the right to defend forces in international airspace. Washington emphasized restraint. Officials said the goal was to degrade the specific threat, not to escalate into wider war. Tehran warned of consequences in later briefings, but its military options were constrained. Moving hardened missile systems and rebuilding coastal radar coverage would take weeks under surveillance and sanctions pressure. Strategically, the message carried weight. The attack and the counterstrike sent a clear signal. An assault on U.S. aircraft will be met with fast, precise, and coordinated force. Analysts called it a deterrent success. They noted 3 lessons. First, integrated sensor networks, satellites, AWACS, ships, and fighters allow fast targeting and response. Second, standoff weapons like JASSM let the U.S. strike from outside enemy engagement zones. Third, rescue and recovery systems worked under pressure, saving the pilot's life and reducing the political cost of the incident. On the regional balance, Iran lost some confidence, at least for a short time. Commanders privately reported a review of coastal tactics. Internationally, shipping lanes stabilized and allied navies increased patrols, showing solidarity without provoking direct conflict. Cost estimates varied. Military analysts placed the damage to Iranian sites in the tens of millions of dollars. The U.S. expended a small number of high-value weapons, a price officials said was justified to protect lives and deter future attacks. In public, the White House emphasized that force had been measured and limited. Behind the scenes, intelligence teams began a longer review to tighten rules of engagement, improve deconfliction protocols, and refine how to deter without escalating. In the end, the outcome closed the immediate crisis. A jet was hit, a pilot survived, a threat was removed, a signal was sent. The Gulf returned to watchful calm, but the lesson was clear. In modern conflict, quick, precise action can stop a spark from turning into a wider blaze. When the dust settled and the Gulf returned to silence, one truth stood above all others. Power today isn't measured by how loud you strike, but by how precisely you do it. The U.S. had taken a hit, responded, and restored control, all within a single cycle of the sun. It was not an act of rage. It was an act of discipline. For decades, the skies over the Middle East have been a test of endurance and nerve. Each incident, each confrontation, adds another line to a long story of deterrence and adaptation. But this one was different. The strike wasn't about territory, and it wasn't about revenge. It was about reminding the world that rules still matter. That even in a region where chaos often dominates, there are lines that cannot be crossed without consequence. The F-15EX mission showed how warfare has changed. It's no longer a contest of who has the most planes or missiles. It's about information, speed, and precision. Drones, satellites, and AI-assisted systems now guide decisions that once took hours, in seconds. The U.S. didn't need to deploy an armada or start a campaign. 2 aircraft, a handful of missiles, and one perfect plan restored deterrence across an entire region. For the pilots who flew that mission, it wasn't glory or vengeance that drove them. It was duty. They understood that every move had to balance power with restraint. A single wrong decision could have ignited a wider conflict. But they followed their training, trusted their systems, and executed flawlessly. For Iran's commanders, the lesson was sobering. Technology and tactics evolve faster than ideology. Their missile battery was designed to intimidate, to send a signal. Instead, it became the symbol of how vulnerable aggression can be against superior coordination and precision. And for the rest of the world watching, the message was unmistakable. The United States may not always strike first, but when it does, it strikes with purpose. And the result is never in doubt. In the end, the burning wreckage on the Iranian coast was more than just the aftermath of a skirmish. It was a quiet reminder that dominance in modern warfare doesn't come from fear. It comes from mastery. The sky, once again, belonged to those who could see farther, think faster, and act smarter. And that day, over the Gulf, the F-15EX proved exactly why the U.S. Air Force still leads them all.